My name is Barton Morris. I'm the principal attorney at the Cannabis Legal Group. This is Nick Galendez, one of our excellent associates. This is Cannabusiness Live. We're recording this show from our office here in Royal Oak on the August 23rd, 2019. This is our 105th or 106th show, and we're very happy to present it to you. Today, we're going to discuss some topics that are going to come up at our next seminar. Our next seminar is going to be on September 26th, 2019 at Cobo Hall. Is it the 27th?
27th.
Yeah, sorry. September 27th at Cobo Hall. The title of the seminar is Cultivating Your Cannabusiness Success. And what we're going to be doing is presenting on topics that we believe are necessary for those that are in the industry, licensed in the industry, to ensure that they understand in order to be able to maintain long-term success in the industry. We have been able to learn a lot of this information through our practice here, but also through the information and the experience that we have out of state. We, of course, are partners with the law firm Vicente Cederberg, and they have taught us an awful lot when it comes to a lot of these topics. We're also bringing in people from all over the country, including our keynote speaker, who's going to be Al Harrington, of course, the former NBA star, but also now the CEO of Viola Brands, which is a multi-state operator, including here in the city of Detroit, or the state of Michigan, that providing products to the industry through that brand name Viola. So, Nick, let's just started talking about a couple things that we're going to be discussing at the event. And first, that we can talk about one of the most important things to industry licensees, especially medical ones, is how to get your municipality to offer an adult license.
And I think everyone's excited about adult use applications to come on board. The Marijuana Regulatory Agency just announced that they're going to be doing presentations, going over the application process. They're kind of rolling that out for interested parties, and then having more kind of detail-oriented presentations for attorneys and those who are kind of going to be dealing with a lot of the nuts and bolts and very specifics about it. But I think the biggest issue that people aren't talking about is the fact that not that many municipalities have opted in. So while I think people are anticipating, November 1st is going to come around and there's going to be a ton of applications, there are still a lot of opportunities that need to be taken advantage of for operators to actually be able to apply, because for adult use, the municipality actually has to allow it or not have opted out. So I think one of the things we're really going to kind of be focusing on specifically on that topic is how to really get the municipality on board with allowing it, different strategies there, whether that be ballot initiatives, backing elected officials who are pro-cannabis, or simply running for office yourself. So there's definitely a lot of things we can kind of go over. They'll definitely be more likely to be more comfortable with you if they know you. So there's a lot of different kind of things to walk through and talk about related to that topic.
Yeah, and so I think let's begin. We'll try not to spend too much time on each of these, but we can begin by discussing the fact that some of these municipalities right now have not permitted any medical licenses, while other ones have. And the topic really is how to get either one of them into providing a recreational license, right? So let's talk about first those that are currently providing medical licenses. They don't necessarily have to provide recreational licenses. And many of them are presumed to have been doing so, right? But they don't necessarily have to. What are you going to do in order to be able to get them to provide a recreational license? Take, for instance, the city of Warren. Right now, is it true that Warren is about to license a handful, maybe like 10 or 15 dispensaries for medical licensure? But that doesn't mean that they're going to be automatically approved for recreational licenses, right?
Right. I'd say that for those who have opted in, they'd be more likely to opt in for adult use, but it's really never a set deal. I think at least it shows if they've opted in for medical, they're warming up to the possibility of having these cannabis businesses in their communities. But I think there's still a big difference to them, not necessarily speaking to Warren specifically, but a city that allows medical might see adult use as completely different, even though they involve the same plant necessarily. So I still think, they're getting calls and solicitations from a lot of interested individuals and companies. And, I think there's some strategy there to make sure that your voice isn't drowned out. Just because you say you want it and it would make a lot of money for the city isn't necessarily going to be the topics that the city officials are going to want to hear or that will actually make them move. So it's definitely a delicate topic that, there's an artful way to do it, and we see people having boots on the ground actually being able to turn over municipalities here and there. But it's definitely not the norm. I'd say still there's a lot more municipalities that need to be brought on board in one way, shape, or form for this industry to actually get going, both for medical and adult use.
Right. A lot of these cities, they've authorized medical marijuana licenses because of the necessity to provide medicine to patients, right? But that's not the same necessity that is potentially good for a recreational license. Why is a recreational license good for the city? It's different for a medical license. And so it's probably a great idea to provide that information. Information like, for instance, it is known that recreational marijuana will decrease the incidence of overdoses on prescription medications for opioids, for instance. Less hospitalizations, less overdose deaths, less overdoses. So like that's one great reason for adult use recreational marijuana. Some others include less arrests, or like, well, now there's no arrests, but it's important to ensure that those that are putting out recreational licenses or special retail licenses will keep the black market from enlarging or from getting bigger, because that's quite frankly what is happening now, and what is probably one of the most important things to ensure it doesn't happen in the future is this increase of the black market. If there's not a recreational license, people are going to be using cannabis, then the likelihood is that they're getting it from the black market, those that aren't licensed, and it's better that we have those that are licensed to be distributing that cannabis and not those that are unlicensed.
Yep, you keep it safe, tested within the system,
Right.
Taxed. Otherwise, the black market's going to be not necessarily causing a huge health epidemic every single time somebody buys from the black market, but it's definitely is a lot more risky and not regulated and a lot less safer. So
Plus, that's how people want to purchase their cannabis. It's just like alcohol. They want to purchase it from a licensed source where they can trust what they're getting. They have a lot more variety of what they're looking for. They can find a lot more different products. This isn't happening in the black market. So while it continues to permit a licensed facility to sell medical marijuana, but the recreational marijuana, it really serves an important function as well. That's what needs to be described and understood by the municipal officials that are thinking about or providing the decision making when it comes to providing recreational licenses. It's important to provide all of that information. We can move on to something that I think is super important. We touched on it, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago when we had Vinar Ayar on the show, and he talked about the fact that the IRS is going to begin some enforcement on marijuana businesses. It's not a matter of whether they're going to or whether there's going to be some people that are unlucky that get audited. It's a matter of how quickly is it going to happen. It is widely known in other states, specifically in Colorado, that the IRS will audit marijuana businesses. So the question really becomes, what can those businesses do now to anticipate and to be prepared for that eventual IRS audit?
And I think
Did you do that show with him?
That was Travis, and
Okay.
I don't think we'll let Vinar at the seminar kind of dig into those deep details. But I think what I got from him being on the show was very high level. Make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row. Make sure the people who are doing the accounting for you really know what exactly to prepare for. Having every single transaction, especially if you're a retail store, having that all accounted for 100% above and beyond, double, triple checking your work so that when the auditor does come to you and starts looking into things, you have everything together. And then also just being prepared how to interact with them when they do come asking you for questions, I think were the two biggest takeaways. And I think we can let him, with his expertise and kind of, having gone through a lot of these and, personal stories, we can kind of have him address that at the seminar. But it was very informative, and kind of the overall big picture is going to be that I think that with federal legality down the road. There's just so many more different laws and things that you need to be aware of, not only to keep your license and stay good with the regulators and with the state and not avoid any law enforcement getting involved, but also just making sure you have a very tight-knit company that is, has its corporate governance and compliance and everything really down to the T, so that you can succeed as a cannabis business. So, if you can't overcome that roadblock with your municipality, or you run into some tax audit issues, and then you have regulatory compliance issues, I think all these things really go towards the health and the longevity of your business, and that's kind of what we're wanting to at least have a discussion about. I think a lot of these topics too, they're not new, they're not unique. I just think that in Michigan, where we're at right now, we're able to offer a unique spin on things. But a lot of these seminars and conferences always really go to town on auditing, taxes, compliance, because those are really the pillars of your business.
So talking about compliance and regulatory compliance, we are going to present a presentation on the importance of maintaining regulatory compliance and things that an operator can do in order to ensure regulatory compliance. And as I sit here today, I'm immediately reminded of the fact that a week ago, Iron Laboratories, that's very well known in the industry, has had an allegation that they were not maintaining the regulatory compliance. Now, I don't know if that's true. My guess is that it's probably not true. I know those guys, and it's always been my belief that they operated on a high level and compliant level, but unfortunately, thus far, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency believes otherwise and has suspended their license indefinitely. I don't know what happened, Nick, but I do know one thing, is that to suspend the license right off the bat is very serious enforcement action. So I guess, I don't know what that means other than to say this is a very serious thing that's going on.
And I hope that everyone wants to follow the rules and make sure that they're above board. This could have been as, and I don't want to speculate too much, but this could have been as minor as just not having the management and oversight. Perhaps it was a rogue employee or something just didn't get double checked and entered in.
Would they suspend a license though?
If it gets that egregious, I would say, especially with a testing lab, it would be grounds for that. But also, it just goes to show you that, maybe you have one rogue employee and that happens. That's enough for them to take your license away if it's that egregious. It's not likely that they're always going to do that, I don't think, but, having all of your ducks in a row and really sticking to the word of the law and how things are supposed to be, just like that, the MRA can come and take away your license if they think you're endangering the health, safety, and welfare. And so it's not good to be one of those test cases to say, oh well, what's the line between what we're doing and what'll get us a fine or what will get our license revoked. I'd say always striving for 100% compliance, which includes corporate governance practices. I know often a lot of different moving parts can happen with negotiations, and maybe one law firm drafts this and it says that, and another one drafts that, and the documents don't talk to one another. Those things can have ramifications, and so it's important to keep communication with all parties involved to make sure that things are done the right way. Knowing the rules and laws and what they actually say is one thing, how they're actually enforced is another thing, and how relaxed enforcement is at the time, how educational the regulators are trying to be versus you should know this 100%, why is it still happening kind of a thing. I think those are two big parts of just regulatory compliance and maintaining that. And then I just think the other thing is with renewals, with knowing who needs to be added or removed, or if you're getting ready for a big round of investment or you're bringing more members in, starting to collect everything you need from them very early so that you don't get delayed or your renewal doesn't risk running out of that expiration time. So that's just a few things about regulatory compliance. I'm definitely going to be digging deeper into that for my presentation. Again, it's not going to be the most unique, breathtaking thing because all the rules and laws are there, but it's just kind of having a discussion and talking it through about how these are actually interpreted and enforced, and definitely the smaller things that can catch you up and cause a whole lot of problems for your business, for compliance, for fines, for your cash flow.
I think actually it's going to be very breathtaking, quite frankly, because I mean it's true. Like like, I don't think, now that we've had this suspension, people are like, oh wow, you know, this is actually real. If we don't maintain compliance, we could lose our license. Think about all the money that is not being made right now, how much it's really costing Iron Labs from being closed, not only just in missed revenue, but also reputation and their ability to be able to get back to where they were before getting licensed. Getting shut down is really, really costly in so many different ways. And it's going to continue to happen, hopefully in a just manner. So it is going to be super important, these principles that we've learned from other states that in order to ensure regulatory compliance. So another topic of conversation that we're going to have, which is very much on everybody's mind, is the manner of raising private equity or private capital in order for investment. This is significantly important in the industry. As we all know, banks are unwilling or unlikely or just on a limited basis providing the capital necessary for investment, for infrastructure, and for expansion, it really puts then all of this need or the necessity for capital in private equity and private money. So it's necessary for people to raise money to be able to really get into the industry, especially industry that costs a lot of money to begin with, in order to understand these private capital markets. We do have Eric Allison from Skytree Investments. They're out of Las Vegas, and he's going to be flying here. We're going to have him here, and he's going to be giving a presentation about the principles of raising money in capital markets here in Michigan. So it's not as easy as some think. It's not easy at all. In fact, what's really important is to ensure compliance with federal securities law. A lot of people really like to overlook that. In fact, they don't like to overlook it. They just do because they don't really understand it. It's something that we've here had to address and learn, specifically because the fact of the matter is, if you're going to raise money and it's going to be outside of your traditional friends and family, then what you're doing is you're offering a security. And if you're offering a security, an opportunity for somebody to invest, a qualified investor, to be able to come and give money to your operation, that's likely something that's going to be necessary to be registered with the SEC. And by failing to do so, that's going to cause problems where you could be criminally prosecuted. You can certainly be civilly liable, and the individual whom that made the investment can get a return of all of their money along with a lot of penalties. And it's not a good scenario. So it's really important for those that are raising money to be able to understand the principles of securities law and when they are exempt from having to do so and when they're not. So Eric's going to talk about that. I'll probably help talk about that a little bit, but he's also going to talk about how to properly raise money and where to look for it, because it is out there, but the manner in which they're getting it and convincing those to do it, that's a whole other story. Eric is an expert at that, so he's going to be here to provide that information. We're going to be very, very fortunate. Our attendees are going to be very fortunate to hear it. Mm-hmm. Travis is going to talk about establishing and protecting a brand. And this is, I think, necessary for everybody, no matter what type of, whatever business you're doing, regardless whether it's in the cannabis industry or not. You have to establish and protect your brand. And the number one thing that we see here is people that begin a brand, they create a brand, and perhaps they look it up in the Michigan corporate lookup, and they don't see it, and they think that they can run with it, but they don't realize that doesn't protect it. It doesn't protect it, and it doesn't mean that somebody else isn't using it, either in this state or outside of the state. And that also doesn't mean that it hasn't been previously trademarked, because using a brand that has been previously trademarked federally means that you could be doing trademark infringement, which of course not only provides penalty, but it's going to stop you from using that trademark. You're going to have to start all over again and really waste a lot of time, money, energy, and effort in establishing and building a brand that you didn't have a right to do in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, because I think one of the common questions we have is, I've thought really hard about my company name. That's the name I want to use. And that's great, but all that does, if that name is available, is tells the state what your company name is and gives them an identification number. Then there's an assumed name, which allows you to be known and sign on legal documents under that assumed name. There's a doing business as, and none of those things really protect you if somebody wants to use your brand and trademark on their products and goods, unless it's officially trademarked or first in use and has some common law protections. Travis will definitely go over that a lot more in depth, but definitely still the overarching problem, as it is with cannabis and banking and a lot of other issues, is the federal illegality makes it impossible for you to get that nationwide trademark protection, federal registration being used in different states. That's still something that can't happen. So what we're seeing is, some caregivers and individuals who have been growing have their brand and they put a logo together and they sell it, and maybe people know them very well for that, but nothing's protected. It's federally illegal, and maybe another company comes in and uses a name that's very similar to it, but really, who gets to use that mark when there's no federal registration that's there, and then there's litigation and a lot of other issues that I think Travis is going to touch on. So just another important area for the whole picture. I mean, if you want to get investors, they want to know that you have a brand, that what protections do you have if I'm investing into your company? Due diligence on whether or not you're investing, or if you're raising capital, or the company trying to raise capital. It's all of these things you can point to, and maybe having a protected trademark and a brand will boost up your value, and doing your due diligence from an accredited investor will make sure you get the funds and they'll work with you and be a good investor in the company. So all of these topics, I think, are kind of well put together and really play off of one another to give a good full picture of a lot of things that operators have probably thought about and will really help and benefit from hearing more about, and with our own nuance and twist on this topic that's talked about with a kind of a Michigan flair to it.
We are talking about the topics that we will be presenting at our Cobo Hall seminar that's going to be held on September 26, 2019, entitled Cultivating Your Cannabusiness Success. And the last thing I think we'll talk about today is one of the topics that I believe Salam Alaya, our corporate law attorney that we have here, she's going to be discussing the importance of doing the appropriate due diligence necessary to acquire a cannabis business. We're doing a lot more of this, of course, these days, is the acquisition, mergers and acquisition of cannabis businesses, real estate, of course, asset purchase agreements. But really what's necessary is to do the due diligence necessary, because when an operator is going to acquire another business, there's a lot of things they could be acquiring. Not only could they be acquiring the positive assets of that business, but there could be negative ones as well, and that could include a whole host of things. And the last thing, and we've seen it, that somebody wants to do is acquire a business that's not valued and is not worth the amount of money that they're paying for it. And so that's the other thing. Due diligence is going to assist in really truly identifying the true value of a business, and that has been super interesting in the industry as well, as we all know, there has been millions of dollars that have been transferred for purchasing businesses, and we don't know thus far is how those dollars is that amount of money really worth it. A lot of people think it is, but we don't know really. We don't know because our industry really hasn't taken off yet. There has been no significant amount of sales necessary for us to look at and make a determination as to the present market value of a business based upon the amount of sales that somebody might be receiving. In addition to the fact that that business might have already been operating in a manner that is not regulatory compliant, and operating in a city that has not made the city very happy in order to ensure that the city is going to maintain that license. As many people should know, these licenses are renewable every year, and a city could simply say, you know what, you're not really doing what we thought you were doing, and we're going to choose not to grant you or continue another license. And somebody operating or purchasing a business under that scenario after paying a lot of money for a city that's not going to renew a license is a really damaging scenario. And yes, that does happen, it can happen, and it will happen, but doing the appropriate due diligence is what really is necessary. Salam is going to talk about that to ensure the acquisition is going to be what the person acquiring or company acquiring it envisions. All right. So I think that we will, anything else?
Oh, nope. That's all I got to say. I was
All right.
going to just say it's interesting, you see numbers get thrown around in the millions, and I know it's, as you touched on it, the market still hasn't settled. There's not good sales figures to figure out and actually crunch the numbers to make sense if that deal makes sense. And there's so much volatility at the local level where maybe you do have 1 of 3 right now, but maybe there's going to be 10 after you pay all that money, and then the value of that license is significantly diminished, let alone it's renewable every year. It has to be approved by the state and the local community. So if, depending on how much money you put down, you could lose that all and then have your license be basically, not completely worthless, but definitely significantly less valuable than when you thought when you had initially started it. So I think that's why it's important, at least right now, as Salam will talk about at our seminar, to do the due diligence. I know eventually there will be some kind of accredited valuations happening where people are actually going in there with authority to kind of look at the building and look at the books and actually put some prices and appraisals on these licenses and facilities. So that'll be interesting, but I think right now it's a little too early just how Michigan's market has developed yet. But I'm hoping to see that soon because, you see numbers, who's to say something's 5 million or 10 when, it's kind of seems like people are just throwing numbers out there. But
yeah, I know. It's crazy. So that'll do it. Please join us at our seminar September 26, 2019. It's a Friday. We'll be going all day at Cobo Hall, and we'll talk about all of these issues. It'll be keynoted. Our keynote presenter will be Al Harrington from Viola Brands. Everybody will receive a whole full day of instruction and information that is going to be really critical to a licensee's long-term success. For now, my name is Barton Morris. This is Nick Galendez. We're lawyers from the Cannabis Legal Group, and we appreciate you watching or at least listening to our program. Thank you.
have a good weekend.